All right. Welcome everyone to the CRAVE session. We are so glad you joined us this afternoon. And today we have a very exciting presentation from Angela, which I will introduce in a bit. But today we will talk more about places matter, prevention, preparedness, resiliency, and recovery, which is very important, especially as we talk about the post-COVID world. So before we get started, I'm going to walk through a couple slides of public service announcements. I'm sure you have this in your email as well, but we do have an upcoming webinar September 17 with Biogen transforming global real estate during pandemic. So make sure that you are signing up for that event. And as always, we want to amplify the messages of our event. So please join the conversation. We are available on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn as well. So please join us and you will hear the most up-to-date information and share. And we also want to thank always our corporate partners, as you start having the names here on my screen as well. But without them, these events won't be possible. So we want to really thank you, the corporate partners, the platinum sponsors as well, and the gold, silver sponsors. We really appreciate your partnership and your sponsorship, and it's really what makes this event possible. All right, so before we get started, I think we will have Angela present, and then there's this Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if you do have a question along the way, please chat them, and we will review that towards the end and making sure that we answer those questions. All right, so with that, I'm very excited to introduce our speaker, Angela Spangler. Angela, thank you for joining us. We are very excited to hear your thoughts. But before that, I'm going to read your bio. Angela Spangler brings expertise in human factors along with unique insights as a professional ergonomist. As a member of the commercial team, she supports the global growth and adoption of the WELL Building Standard, an evidence-based system for measuring, certifying, monitoring the performance of building features that impact occupant health and well-being. Angela received her bachelor's from University of Idaho in psychology with a minor in architecture, and she then went to earn her master's degree in human environment relations from the Design and Environmental Analysis program at Cornell University. Angela is a WELL faculty and has her Associate Ergonomics Professional Accreditation. So thank you, Angela, for joining us. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say about post-COVID and just everything else that you have to share. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you, Cerise. It's really exciting to be here with everyone today. As I am getting myself set up, you can see my screen all right? Awesome. Okay, so as Cerise mentioned, I'm a director on the commercial team at IWBI. I also focus quite a bit on the education sector, the healthcare sector, and the government sector. So as I talk through my presentation today, I might be pulling a few examples from each of those key areas. And I'm leaving this slide up for just a moment for anyone who might want to take down contact information. I would love to be a resource to anyone on the line and any colleagues as you're considering how to move forward and create even healthier real estate moving out of this pandemic. So to set a little bit of context, at the International Well Building Institute, we have a fairly straightforward mission. It is to help people thrive through better buildings, better communities, healthier people. We're essentially creating human-centered design to drive healthier behaviors at scale. So we'll talk through that a little bit today. But since we're talking first about just the impact of space and the places that we surround ourselves in, I think that those of you tuning in today, we've all been kind of existing over these past few months, really starting to pay acute attention to how our environments are either really supportive or potentially not. And so that's kind of one of the lenses that I like to bring to this conversation as a professional ergonomist, to help people think through all of these spaces that they occupy and how to essentially optimize them for their own health and well-being outcomes. So from an organizational perspective, this is the framework that IWBI followed: prevention and preparedness, followed by resiliency and recovery. We've thought long and hard through immediate actions that need to take place in this kind of post-COVID or current alongside COVID environment, and then really work to identify what the long-term strategies are to create and continue to evolve and push the needle on healthier environments moving forward. So early March, when our offices shut down, we were kind of in this prevention stage. And prevention is really all about reducing the possibility of infection. So taking all of the information that we know about the way that COVID in particular is transmitted and really pulling out those key strategies to help keep people safe. So things like hand washing, updating cleaning protocols, considering the quality of the air and the cleaning products that people are bringing on site, and then ultimately pulling together the thought leadership that's coming from a risk management approach with that from a health promotion approach to create a thoughtful kind of approach forward. So we then transitioned into the preparedness stage, and one of the key findings from a global perspective is that organizations that had some level of emergency planning in place for any type of disaster relief or emergency preparedness have been better able to support employees as they transition to a remote or a distributed type team, have had kind of the right policies in place to not only support from a physical perspective, but also from a mental and social connectedness perspective. At the International Well-Building Institute, when we're thinking about health, we're not necessarily thinking about like the absence of disease, but rather how we're thinking through holistically all of the kind of key considerations that need to come into play to support mental health, social connectedness, social well-being, physical health, so on and so forth. So now that we've been kind of pulling in some of these key learnings over the past 6+ months and having the benefit of getting the initial insights from our Asia team, who kind of tipped us off to what was coming down the pike, we're working our way into this resilience and recovery phase. Many organizations are talking through reopening plans. We're thinking through what different levels, from the individual to the building to the community to the city level, how can we address each of these kind of key markers or key milestones to support mental resilience and kind of work our way into this phase of recovery as 2020 comes to a close, hopefully sooner rather than later, and as we move onward and upward. So when this pandemic hit, the International Well-Building Institute was right about to launch our inaugural conference. For those of you on the line who are embedded within the community, you probably know this. We were very disappointed to have to postpone, but it was the right thing to do. And at that moment, we decided to stand up a task force on COVID-19 and other respiratory infections. And the primary goals of that task force were to create a series of documents, guidelines, kind of industry-specific information, thought leadership on how to move forward through the pandemic, as well as to take a one final pass of the second version of WELL, which up until last week was still in its pilot form, to go through and identify the features or the strategies that are really timely, relevant, impactful, and figure out where any gaps might have existed. You know, we've been in the market for a number of years, so it was really important to us to take that pause and reflect back and see how we can take this moment to bake in additional strategies. So some of the guiding principles behind the task force itself was we wanted something that would be really globally represented, to produce outputs that were action oriented, which I'll talk about here momentarily. We stood up a specific what's it called? Like web platform database where we're collecting insights from experts all around the world to ensure that we're not missing anything here. So we were really hoping to get, you know, a handful of members, a handful of industries and countries represented, and we were really blown away by the people who came from far and wide to contribute their expertise on this task force. This is a kind of quick snapshot of some of the co-chairs of the task force. If we fit any more on this slide, you wouldn't be able to even recognize them. But hopefully, for those of you who are familiar with the International Well Building Institute and potentially tuning in to our Places Matter series or the Power of Place series, where we started interviewing a number of these task force co-chairs, you might be familiar with Dr. Richard Carmona, Dr. Joseph Allen, who came on and did a session about return to schools, and a number of other professionals from this list. We had great representation from public health officials, virologists, building scientists, architects, designers, kind of the whole gamut. So just to give context as to where that key group of contributors fits within the larger WELL ecosystem, one of the special things about WELL is that we're constantly pulling from our network to improve and iterate on the WELL building standard and the certification framework. And we're pulling data from our project teams. Each and every one of the concepts within WELL has a specific advisory with key experts that convene and share emerging trends in research and the latest public health information. We've got a member organization that helps pull together similar organizations, some of which are joining us today, thank you, as well as our WELL faculty network, our expansive WELL AP network, and then all of the insights from project teams around the world. So we're really interested in kind of this continuous improvement and continuous iteration, and always keeping a pulse on what's happening kind of in each corner of the world and how we can fold in these recommendations to any guidelines, ratings, certifications, any strategies that we're recommending, to kind of fully have this evidence base to support the strategies that we're recommending. So I'll pause there and talk quickly about the evolution of WELL. WELL was introduced to the market in 2014, for anyone who is unfamiliar, with the first version of the WELL building standard. This was a rating system that was primarily focused on quantifying the health impacts of the physical environment on human health outcomes, but primarily initially in corporate office space or commercial office space. We started with about 7.7 million square feet of real estate, and we're really thrilled to see this program kind of grow and evolve over the past 6 years. In 2017, we introduced the WELL Community Standard, which was the first time that we took a a look beyond the built environment, beyond the buildings where we're spending our time, and really started to put forward recommendations on district or neighborhood scale interventions. Things like walkability, bikeability, is this well community in close proximity to healthy local foods, and really start to think more about the community at large. In 2018, about a month after I joined the organization, the team introduced the first version of Well V2 in its pilot form. And Well V2 represented a fundamental shift from the first version of Well. Well V2 was really written to be applicable to each and every space type all over the world. So whereas in the past, we might have introduced specific pilot programs and subsets of how you can tailor these recommendations to unique space types like schools or commercial kitchens or retail spaces, a space that deviates from the traditional corporate office, Well V2 was really built on these guiding principles that any space with human occupants can benefit from going through the certification journey and having the kind of rigorous third-party on-site testing to really start to make the invisible aspects of our environment more visible. We're in the market of translating research into actionable strategies and really bringing to light each and every one of the factors that has a direct influence or a direct impact on human health. In 2019, we took another kind of big organizational shift and started to introduce the Well Portfolio program. And while I won't get into extreme detail today because I want to focus more on kind of the COVID evolution and the COVID story here, I will just say that the portfolio program introduced a way that organizations could demonstrate leadership and show a commitment to health and well-being by using the Well V2 feature set to start to chip away at incremental progress over time. It's more about the journey than the destination. And so through that framework, large global companies, small companies, companies of all sizes would participate at a portfolio scale where they're now tracking the health performance of each and every building within their real estate portfolio. So the very exciting news is that the Well version 2 was recently graduated from its pilot form into its fully baked standard itself. This was one of the first kind of deliverables from the task force was to go through and find any areas where we might not have had the COVID solution in place. The primary example that sticks out in my mind is, for those of you familiar with the feature set, and I'm trying not to get too technical and lose anyone here, but in previous versions of Well, we'd have a feature that would discuss hand washing. And what that feature was about was more about the dimensions of the sink, the type of soap that was available, the dispensers, the hand dryers, and all of the considerations to ensure that you had kind of the right infrastructure to support that behavior. One of the things that we realized, one of the missing components, was that we didn't necessarily have any requirements in the standard about educating those on A, the importance of hand washing, and then B, the proper procedure. So as we're kind of taking these learnings from how to fully take the strategies around prevention and preparedness and take these recommendations that are being put forward by leading organizations like the CDC and the WHO and ASHRAE and other kind of standard setting organizations, we're collecting this information and basically strengthening the product that is the Well version 2. So to orient you all to kind of these major concept areas and the types of strategies that one would find, you can see on the screen here that Well is broken down into a 10 concept framework. These have each and every one of the strategies that is put forth in the well building standard comes from an evidence base and has been kind of peer reviewed or expert reviewed for its level of impact. So you'll see that in the architecture of the standard. There are strategies that are required, that are kind of the bare minimum, what it takes to create a healthier environment, and then those that are optional, that kind of create this choose your own adventure dynamic path forward towards implementing healthier strategies. The types of strategies that you'll see across these 10 concept areas are kind of equally split between things that the building can do and things that the organization can do from a policy perspective. So when you think about things that the building can do, there'll be architectural type recommendations, building maintenance, and building operations. So again, thinking through like a healthier cleaning policy. And I'll kind of quickly give an example of each of the types of strategies that you would see in these different 10 concept areas. So the air concept is pretty straightforward. It's about regulating the ventilation rates, making sure that you've got supply to fresh air, whether that can be done through operable windows or increasing the supply of fresh outdoor air, or whether that's done through implementing different filters within the space and knowing that you have the right types of thresholds to kind of promote and support human cognitive performance. The water concept is focused both on water quality and on accessibility. So ensuring that people are staying hydrated, that the access to the water that they're using for human consumption has been filtered and is safe. The nourishment concept is really about, in spaces where food is provided, how can we use strategies like nudge architecture to really guide people to make that healthiest choice their default choice? So things like portion size, having mindful eating spaces, having ingredient labeling, all of these types of strategies can be found within that nourishment concept. The light concept takes into consideration both electric and natural daylighting and tries to promote environments that will support the human circadian rhythm. So enabling people to be alert and awake and focused when they need to be, and then ensuring that the type of lighting environment that you're providing is enabling people to unwind as the day progresses so that they're able to sleep better at night. The movement concept is one that is also kind of aptly named. It's about creating situations where people will be moving more frequently throughout the space. So whether that's promoting active commuting, whether that's celebrating a staircase, whether that is removal of personal waste bins at the workplace, there are a handful of strategies that are kind of specifically geared toward getting people more active throughout the day. Thermal comfort and sound used to be combined in the first version of WELL, but they've been broken out in WELL version 2 to specifically address kind of those considerations, to make sure that people have control over selecting spaces that are thermally comfortable and have the right acoustics for the type of work that they're performing. So considering interior noise that's traveling throughout a building, considering sources of external noise, and so on and so forth. The materials concept is probably one of the most technical, that looks at all aspects from furniture to furnishings to finishes to paints, adhesives, floorings, every single thing that you're bringing into the space, and understanding specifically how it's contributing to the overall environmental air quality and human contact and any other kind of health related or human related focus there. And then the mind and the community concept, those are two that are kind of the key differentiators for WELL from many other rating systems. So this is when we're really diving into policy level support, things that organizations can do to support mental resilience, mental well-being, social cohesion, all of these types of strategies. So you'll see things like immunity support, like promoting vaccinations, to things like sick leave policies, to things like ensuring voter participation and civic participation. So all sorts of kind of policy related features find themselves buried within the mind or community concepts. Now, the key kind of differentiator with WELL from others is that it's performance verified. This is not merely a checklist of strategies that we're recommending. This is a program that requires a third party to come on site and test that the air, the water, the lighting, the temperature, and the acoustical elements are all specifically meeting the thresholds as identified within the WELL building standard. So that's kind of the fundamental evidence-based, performance-driven background of the standard as it sits today. So one of the exciting things, if you remember in the kind of intro evolution of WELL slide, I mentioned that we started with 7.7 million square feet of real estate. Through the introduction of the portfolio program, through the heightened attention that is being placed now on the significance of our built environment and how it's directly influencing our health outcomes, we've been blown away by the growth and the adoption of WELL at scale. Since about the start of the pandemic, we've welcomed about 1 million square feet per day. This slide was updated just a few days ago, and so it should be still fairly close to accurate at this point in time. But you can see that we've got over 4,400 projects around the world, encompassing over 600 million square feet, and that there are 13,000 people within the WELL AP community. So much of our early growth and success has been that this is truly a people-driven movement. And so the WELL APs in the 93 countries around the world are kind of these experts within their own organization who are putting forward these strategies and encouraging healthier decisions being made at scale, whether it's within their own organizations or whether it's for their clients. But it's been a wild ride, to say the least, and it's been really remarkable to see just how some of the drivers kind of pre-COVID were really about trying to quantify the health impacts and trying to say that, you know, when you get a space that has better air quality and better lighting and better acoustics, we're starting to see things like reduction in turnover, reduction in sick days, and improvements to hiring. And we're seeing all of this great payback. I'm flashing a few of the external reports on the slide here. As a third-party organization, we really value what these third parties have done to evaluate kind of the payoff or the return on investment for healthier certifications. Pre-COVID, these were kind of the driving decision makers. Post-COVID, it is now on everyone's mind how to create the healthiest environment to instill a sense of confidence that it will someday be safe to return to these spaces, if not already, depending on where in the world these projects are kind of piping in from. And to start to measure each and every one of these metrics to instill that sense of confidence. So that was kind of the crash course, WELL 101. That's the standard, the portfolio program, kind of what our organization, that's the bread and butter of the organization. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about what the task force outcomes were. So the very first was this document, which I would encourage you all to download at some point. This is a free resource, just as the WELL Building Standard is publicly available online, that pulls out the key strategies that are specifically relevant for supporting in the fight against COVID-19. So that document goes through all of the WELL V2 feature set and identified kind of these 8 key areas and kind of plugged the features in there. So as new organizations are coming forward with an interest, expressing an interest in certification, these are kind of the 8 guiding themes that will be kind of a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are a handful of strategies around promoting clean contact, things like touchless where possible, touchless operation of doors, whether that's through installing like automatic door openers, or whether that's through kind of propping certain doors open to reduce contact there. That's kind of one bucket of strategies there. There are, of course, the entire air concept, but key strategies within that to improve air quality. Maintaining water quality is a very interesting topic. So for all of these buildings that have been sitting largely vacant for the last 6+ months, it's important for them to have plans in place to do flushes to prevent things like Legionella outbreaks, and really ensure that that is being taken under consideration, not necessarily from a COVID perspective, but from like the trickle out perspective. And then there are those policy related features. So things like managing risk and creating a culture of resilience, how to support a workforce that may continue to be distributed. So how can you promote things like ergonomics from a home office setup and ensure that you're not creating environments where employees are at risk for burnout or other kind of work-life balance issues. We've pulled together all of the strategies that have to deal with strengthening the immune system, so like promoting the flu vaccination and other key strategies that play into that piece there. Fostering mental resilience. So this has been the first time in many of our lifetimes, all of our lifetimes, that something at this scale has happened, and it's kind of shifted everything from childcare to working from home for prolonged periods to having partners with job insecurity, to all of these different types of key considerations, which are sometimes outside of the world of work or the scope of work, but really need to be taken into consideration as you're trying to identify what you can do to support the mental health of those within your organization. And then finally, all of those strategies that exist around community resilience and recovery. So I'm going to flash back to that screen. That's kind of the header from that report. It is a 15 or so page document that kind of identifies those key themes within WELL that plug into each and every one of these groups. So that was outcome number 1. Outcome number 2, and what I'm really excited to share with you today before we open up into the question and answer portion of today's show, is the new health safety rating. So as I mentioned, we're kind of on that timeline. We're here in the resilience and recovery mode, and the health safety rating is a collection of features from WELL version 2 that are specifically responded to COVID, but also have lasting impact. We're calling them our evergreen strategies that really talk about infectious disease control and creating this kind of sense of confidence before people are going to want to reoccupy spaces in pre-pandemic ways. So the health safety rating, much like everything else at our organization, is entirely evidence-based, and it was developed through expertise and input from our task force, as well as collaborations with the World Health Organization, the CDC, ASHRAE, the pulling together data from the WELL Building Standard itself and tapping into those concept advisories. So each of those 10 concepts in WELL, we kind of pulled the advisors to help us come up with this exact feature set that is COVID/infectious disease specific. So the 4 kind of categorical buckets that these strategies break down are operational policies, maintenance protocols, emergency plans, and then stakeholder education and engagement. And one of the key things that I'll say at this point is that the health safety rating is a relatively quick turnaround documentation review to have a third party review all of these things, the plans, the protocols, the communication strategy, to determine that, or basically to kind of demonstrate with that sign of approval, with that seal on the entryway, that all of these policies have been vetted. So the idea here is to build a sense of confidence around the reopening phase, which I know is coming at widely different paces, where depending on where you're calling in from around the world. Our offices are headquartered in New York City, and I was very pleased to see that there's a plan to have in-person dining by the end of the month, which is really exciting. So these are the types of strategies to kind of build forward to those reopening dates and to instill a confidence through the general public that you've done the right thing. The program in and of itself is very flexible. There are 22 features that have been identified. In order to achieve the rating, an organization needs to meet and document compliance for 15 of the 22, and that is any 15 that they select. There are no kind of required or optional features. They're all considered optional features within this rating system. It's meant to be something that's scalable. So for companies that have multiple building types, these policies will govern all of them. So updating the cleaning protocol in one, rolling that out at scale, starts to get them thinking of long-term, big picture, how can we move the needle towards healthier environments? It has that same level of credibility with the third-party review through GBCI, as would be expected from anything that's published from the International Well Building Institute. And it's really meant to be priced at an extremely accessible rate. So it's done at scale. It's a per building type of pricing model. All of the fee structures and tables are available on the website. But it's something that when an organization is interested in doing this, they can select their features within a matter of days to weeks, have that review completed within 8 to 10 days, and then immediately have a seal to proudly kind of demonstrate this achievement. So I'll talk in a little bit more detail about what those kind of core areas are and talk about some of the strategies that you might find within them. So for the strategies within the cleaning and sanitization procedures, you'll see things like supporting hand washing, as mentioned previously, reducing surface contact, improving both the cleaning products that you're using and the cleaning practices that you're using. So the schedules, the frequencies, what's coming into site, and how you're making that information publicly known to instill that sense of confidence that the space is safe to reoccupy. For the emergency preparedness programs, the features that you'll find within that category are about having an emergency preparedness plan. As schools are kind of in the process of reopening now and coming up with hybrid modes of whether it's in person or remote, it's really important that they have an emergency preparedness plan for future spikes, future school closures, to basically be able to better handle the situation than we did the first time. And that's the example that's nearest and dearest to my heart as the education sector lead. But as you can tell, this is important across all industries and across all sectors. So other things are like providing emergency resources, healthy re-entry, emergency resilience. For the health services resource category, we're really working with organizations to understand the importance of providing things like sick leave, mental health support, promoting flu vaccines to support immunity, creating a smoke-free environment to support respiratory health. One of the things that we know is if somebody is required to work for pay and they do not necessarily have a sick leave policy, it's going to be harder for them to stay home if they're symptomatic, if there's not a good policy in place. So in order to keep the entire community safe, it becomes really important to start to think about all of the essential workers, all of the backup support, all of the different ways that you can keep the entire population safe, whether that's through staggering occupancy or having A days and B days or whatever the strategy may be. Part of the guidance is just ensuring that people know not to come in when they're sick, as should be hopefully common knowledge by this point in time and by this stage in the pandemic, but is really, really important. We're only as safe as kind of the lowest common denominator. So I'll get off my soapbox there. For the air and water quality management, the features that you'll see there are understanding the ventilation rates of any existing HVAC systems, maintaining the air treatment, having the Legionella management plan, as I mentioned before, monitoring both the air and water quality, and then thinking through other things that could contribute to respiratory issues like mold and moisture on site. So having a plan in place for kind of all of these kind of key areas. And then when it comes to the stakeholder engagement and communication, the strategies that you'll find there are really about promoting health and wellness. So that's like the educational programming, workplace wellness type strategies. And then, of course, in any type of facility where food is prepared on site, being overly transparent and communicative about the health, safety, and processes for food contact, food development and distribution, and so on and so forth. So I kind of previewed this journey, but essentially all of the feature set in detail, including citations, are publicly available on the website. Organizations can customize the 15 strategies, 15 of the 22 strategies, including up to 3 innovation strategies is what they're called, which are kind of ways to go above and beyond, or something that might be a more technical implementation or technical review. Every strategy that we pulled within this rating is meant to require no capital expenditure. So it's really meant to be that policy review. That's turned over to GBCI. 8 to 10 days later, feedback is delivered, rating is achieved, and this is something that is renewed on an annual basis. So for those who have not seen or potentially heard the news, we are embarking upon a major media kind of campaign, a Look for the Seal campaign, over the past few weeks and next few months, to really start to share with the general public everything that organizations are doing to promote their health, safety, well-being, so on and so forth. So one of the kind of key things that'll be different about these seals than, for example, a plaque on the wall is that they'll have a QR code that can actually tie back to the features that organizations have received credit for and the different types of plans in place. So not only will that instill a sense of confidence that it's safe to go to enter these spaces because they have the right cleaning protocol and they're doing the right thing, but it'll also kind of help to bridge the gap and create a sense of transparency, so that people are confident there. So this is way too many words for one slide, but I did just want to preview it for a moment just to show some of the early adopters within the program. So it was introduced late July. We've got over 200 organizations, over 500 facilities, some of which who have already achieved the rating. RXR was the very first. Yankee Stadium just achieved the rating, I believe, about 2 weeks ago. But you can see there's a wide variety of industry, space type, sector, all represented, pursuing this type of rating. And we're really excited that we're kind of at this stage where we're no longer necessarily having to convince people that the health of their facility matters and has that direct and tangible impact on human occupants. And now it's kind of just becoming expected and meant to be the norm. So I will open it up and hand it over to Cerise here in just a moment, and we can kind of dive into any Q&As, and I'm happy to expand on anything in further detail. But I would be remiss not to mention that through the remainder of the year, we are running a special campaign on our WELL AP credential. It's discounted over 50%, with 20% of the proceeds going to Doctors Without Borders. So now is certainly the time if you are interested in dipping the toe in the water, if you're interested in becoming a member of this global health-focused community, the world is your oyster. So with that, I will take a sip of water and invite Cerise to pop back in with any Q&A.
Thank you, Angela. This has been very enlightening. I feel like even for myself, who's been in the industry, by just hearing how robust kind of the information is, especially now, I feel like everyone's looking for the source of truth in terms of what is absolutely necessary for us to understand. And I can see that the health and safety rating even can be something that previously, like you said, wasn't necessarily expected. It was more about doing good for your employees and your environment. But I feel like now there's never been a more important time to think about that as a seal or as a confirmation from employees to know that their workplace is indeed safe and indeed healthy, for them to be comfortable to come in. So it has been really, really awesome to hear that. Before, I think we have a question already on the, and for the audience, please submit the question through the Q&A button at the bottom left, next to the, I think, video button on your screen. And the first question we got is from Krista. What elements or recommendations do you see being incorporated in order to address COVID issues in the WELL building standard moving forward? And how has this been a change from the current standard?
That's a really great question. Thank you, Krista. So the exact elements that are kind of COVID specific are all detailed in that strategies document. There were minor tweaks to a handful of the features, but largely what we were focused on was creating a healthier environment from the onset. So I was personally slightly surprised to see that after these exercises, there wasn't a ton of change from the actual feature language to what would make it more COVID specific. And we didn't necessarily want to, the industry started asking for a COVID-free seal, which obviously we can't do. We can review policies, we can review protocols, we can ensure that all of the right elements are in place here. But there was the change that did take place can be identified in that key strategies document.
Great. How can service providers / product manufacturers can contribute to this initiative as IWBI does not certify or endorse products?
That's a really great question as well. So one of the key ways that we've tapped into that network, into the manufacturing community and service provider community is actually through our membership program. I didn't really speak about that much today, but there is certainly information available on our website. But our membership program was developed in order to demonstrate strong alignment between manufacturers with a health-focused mission as well as ourselves. And some of the kind of key benefits of becoming a member of IWBI is it's a way to kind of get on that short list without IWBI specifically saying, you know, you need to go to such and such product manufacturer, because we aren't able to do that, but we are able to point our project teams towards those within kind of our well ecosystem or our well network to others who are either through their products meeting feature requirements, through their products contributing to point earning opportunities on well certified projects, or through their products delivering education or some sort of element that will also support and advance the mission of creating healthier environments. So I would encourage any of you on the line who kind of fall within that bucket to really look into that membership program and start to see some of those partnerships.
That's great. Well, shifting gears to, I think, related to the first question about how do we make sure like we have a quantifiable measure of cleanliness besides providing best practices?
So that's something for the certification itself that starts to come through in the performance verification. The kind of best example that I can think of from like an actual project example was this building on the West Coast. I won't name names because I don't want to get anybody in trouble here. But this was a high-rise Class A office building, like beautiful, top of the line, best building you could imagine, that on paper should have definitely passed performance verification, should have achieved WELL certification, no problem. Actually had to go through a couple of different times because there was one key area within the air quality that they continued to fail again and again. And it's like, by having the process of having somebody come on site and actually test the levels of VOC and other particulates within the air, they were able to identify the source of contamination as actually the elevator shafts that were sucking in all of this unfiltered air from outside. I believe this project was in LA, so it was not the healthiest of all air that was just being sucked inside the building in order to achieve a smoother elevator ride. And by having that third party come on site and do the testing, they were able to identify that issue, correct for it, and then ultimately move forward and achieve the certification. So the same type of thing can be seen when you're doing air quality sampling and all of these different space types. You'll start to see what the triggers are, whether it's a poorly ventilated copy and fax room, whether it's poorly ventilated bathroom spaces, whether it's an air intake that's right by an exhaust, whatever the issue may be, that's the kind of case endpoint for performance verification.
Wow, that's amazing how the test could actually inform kind of a broader issue that otherwise wouldn't have been noticed.
Exactly.
That's great. There's a question about the certification itself. Do you need to purchase the exam in addition to the exam prep bundle? Can you explain the pricing structure?
Certainly. So the exam is the thing to purchase to ultimately become a WELL AP. The exam prep bundle is actually kind of a curated list of resources. So things like a study guide and practice material. One thing that I will mention to anyone who's interested is that for the first time ever in COVID, our parent company actually sponsored a Well AP exam prep series for free. So if you go onto our website and search for the exam prep series, it's a 5-part course that was put on by one of our Well faculty members that could be pretty similar to the type of content that you would see in that exam prep bundle. So you certainly don't need both. It depends on your personal study style and level of familiarity with these concepts. But I would say if you're interested, the pricing is good through the end of 2020. So that would be the timeline to act upon.
That's great. For those who wanted to be more educated in the topics, and definitely there's opportunities to do so here. We're reaching kind of 4 minutes left on our time, and if anyone wants to submit any more questions, please do so. We'll take one more question. In the meantime, I have a question for you, Angela. I'm curious to hear your perspective on how landlord and tenants have been approaching well building, because it sounds like there has been a lot of conversation between whose responsibility is it to provide a healthy place, right? Like, especially a lot of times, there's a lot of things that are outside of tenants' control. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts, how you've been working with those parties.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned before, some of the drivers for Well pre-COVID were to demonstrate leadership, to attract better tenants, to attract better employees, so on and so forth. We have a version of the Well building standard that is focused on the base building. It's called the Well Core program. And that really focuses in on everything that's under the building owner or the landlord's control. And through creating a healthier base building infrastructure, they can then extend kind of a starting point or discounts or any type of incentives or motivations for their tenants to come in and kind of complete out the process and achieve certification in those interior spaces. So the demand is certainly there. We're seeing that it's helping to increase leasing rates, basically able to secure better rents. There is interest kind of on both sides of that coin.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I see a lot of value in even having the health and safety rating at a building level, because I feel like it's just a lot of impact and mostly are dependent on the building infrastructure itself. So.
Right, exactly.
All right, so I think we are in 2 minutes. Maybe what we can do, Angela, is also display your contact information again at the beginning, so that if people want to chat with you and connect with you, they can do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll throw that up on the screen here. And
but this has been an enlightening conversation and definitely a timely topic for us to talk through. So we're really appreciative of your time and sharing with us on behalf of Cornet. So we really appreciate it, Angela.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Cerise. And I look forward to connecting with those on the line and supporting any of these questions as they come up.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Hope you have a great weekend and great Friday. Thank you.
Thank you.